yet another video. Really sorry. Sincerely, I know it's a little too much for one day, but I just not sleeping for whatever dopey reason. So I've been thinking, and I think we'll make this a in the series on the drag problem. So this is another drag video. But I'll do comments at the end, I think. Other comments besides the cliche Art Vandelay. Okay, have you tried to, so the McGinn guy said some kind of crap, I'll read that later. Have you tried to study his theory, question mark, because it seems to me that you have to only give a purely one-sided view of things you don't understand. You've here only give a purely one-sided view. It's not much of a view anyway. Me and the McGinn guy don't get along very well anyway, but regardless. When you say, have you studied his theory? Yeah, there's a lot to the theory. So, I mean, you're hung up on this one drag subject, but the theory covers a ton of physics, all the way from the nuclear forces to magnetism, electricity, and gravity. And so to play this game like it all hangs on this one question is really just kind of bullshit. But anyway, play along. Alright, tell me, how exactly does any of DraftScience responses mitigate the issue of drag? Okay, now I pointed out that, you know, it's really a ratio problem. That we know force doesn't interact with force. That's consistent in most all of physics as far as I know. And so if you can collect force, as I've talked about, the square box collecting force, the idea would be is that force would be impervious to drag. So if you can increase in an atom how much matter is being moved in a direction by force, then you can overcome drag. Now, I don't think that's an irrational statement. But regardless, I'll show, you know, I've did the helium nucleus, because that's the only thing I'm sure of that you can actually shoot somewhere that actually will hold its velocity. I mean, helium nucleuses fly across space and get here. So that's the only thing we know for sure can fly, so to speak. Anyway, that's the only thing we know for sure overcomes the drag problem. Alright. How is his response even remotely relevant to the obvious fact, so he says it's obvious, that if most of the matter is not moving forward, including the protons, then the body would move forward? Well, again, most of the mass is. It's just how it gets there. And that gets complicated because it has to do with how much time, how much speed it's traveling in the different directions. And you know, that's the whole point of precession. So to say that this is a simple subject, I think is cheating the argument completely, because the physical dynamics can get quite complex. And every time I play with a new diagram, there's all new ways to look at it. But you want to just pretend it's a closed subject, that there's no possible way to create a force mechanism that pushes matter in a direction. Okay, I don't think that's true. Or, even worse, what about the fact that that any internal force kept by matter cannot maintain propulsion without leaving exhaust? Well, I don't think that's true either, because we're talking about a frictionless environment. So I'll give a simple example that I was going to draw, but I won't bother drawing it. I mean, maybe I will, but let's say you had a pendulum clock, and the pendulum was perfectly frictionless, so it could just go back and forth forever. Okay, it lost no energy. And let's say instead of it just swinging this much, it swang a little past halfway up, and that at halfway up it hit the surface of the clock. Okay, so it banged into it, bang, and then it went to the other side and bang. But it didn't lose any energy, because when the pendulum hits the wood, it makes a perfect reflection, a perfect kinetic ball, no friction. So wherever force comes in comes right back out again. So when it bangs into the wood, it's going to swing around and bang into the wood on the other side, and then it's going to swing back and bang into the wood on the other side, and it's just going to keep pushing the clock up. I think that'll work, under the conditions stipulated. No friction, and the fact that the interactions are purely kinetic. No losses. It's a pure reflection, a complete reflection. Alright, okay, leaving exhaust. So that system wouldn't have any exhaust. In this case, it would disintegrate the matter. Disintegrate, yeah. In this case, it would disintegrate the matter. So I guess he's saying consume it or something? I don't know. Alright, how about you try to provide a single substantive comment? So again, like this has substance in it. I mean, there's no substance in your comment besides saying, no, you can't. Are you saying something else? That can't happen. Are you doing something more intelligent than that? I don't think so. James, because so far you present yourself as a partisan bystander. Well, obviously, like I said, his partisanship is hard-earned, because I really find a lot of his theories stupid, and I've said so. This whole global warming is being caused by whatever, shellfish or something, whatever his theory is. I thought of another problem with the global warming thing that's really kind of interesting, so I'll just throw it in for the sake of it. There's this whole problem with the magnetic poles on Earth. And apparently they have some geological evidence that the magnetic poles were 25% weaker 100 million years ago, or something like that. I can't remember the exact number, and I really should try to get that. So that 100 million years ago, the magnetic poles were 25% weaker, which would mean that the radiation belt would be 25% weaker. And that's the thing stopping all of the nasty shit from getting to the surface of the Earth. It's getting deflected by the magnetism and the magnetic fields, and stopping it from hitting the Earth. And so that's another global warming kind of issue, right? I mean, the Earth might have gotten cold because the magnetic field got stronger, and that's what cooled the Earth from, dinosaur era. And I've really not heard that argument before. But I mean, if it's true that, the magnetic field is actually reversed at periods, it's kind of a little bit wacky. But the idea of it being weaker would create a greenhouse problem pretty clearly. So, I mean, it just might explain why it was so much warmer, back in the Geastric days. Geastric. Getting old sucks. Anyway. Alright, so back now to the drawings. What I think, look, the last time I thought it was pretty good. The more I thought about it, I'm saying, that just does, the square thing isn't working. It's pushing as much stuff this way as it is down. I've found some problems. And, I was feeling pretty good about it. So this is a liability of doing this stuff in person, live, as it happens. And so take what I say with some fair grains of salt, in terms of I'm not making a proof here. I'm doing a proof of theory, so to speak. Alright, so I had done a bunch of square thinking, and I might as well show some of that. And trying to come up with the forces, which would be like what's holding the protons together, and there's an electron in the middle, and they're getting drawn towards the electron, and then the force migrates around, and the repulsion between the protons keep them apart. So I'm trying to balance all the forces, and I figure, well, if I put an extra electron in, and it goes around, back, up, 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 up. But the problem with that is the reflected force. I figured out, hey, with the reflected force, this isn't going to work out at all. It's just not going to work for me. So anyway, so then I turned it into a triangle, and I was trying to figure out, I have to make this into an atomic structure. So it worked a lot nicer if I could put an extra electron in. But this is basically the configuration of the helium nucleus. So this is the thing we know travels through space with a velocity and keeps moving. I mean, at least that's what physics says. I don't know it personally. I haven't seen the evidence, but clearly they say these nucleuses come crashing down from outer space and, you know, cause all kinds of you know, they break apart, they shatter because they're going kind of fast, and they break into protons and neutrons and, you know, radiation. So this is the mechanism I really need to make into a perpetual motion machine, and I think I've got the kernel of it here. So my first idea was putting the 2 electrons here at the top, and they would essentially, the force would go up, hit the electron, reflect, go all the way around, hit the electron, reflect, go all the way around. So this is the perpendicular EMF kind of scenario. And obviously I'm not explaining why it goes this turn and this turn and this turn instead of going the other perpendicular directions. I think that will have something to do with how close an electron is to it. So I've only labeled these roughly. I just labeled, here's a neutron, neutron. So that's the proton of the neutron. So a neutron is basically an electron and a proton. That's what it degrades into. The proper word for that degrade is just sucks. Disambiguates. You know, somebody caught me on a, you know, I said spontaneous instead of instantaneous. And I just figure people gotta be able to figure out what I meant. Come on, they gotta be able to. But anyway, probably not. You know, people suck. Well, anyway, so this is basically what this is what, what's the word? Radio decay. So this is what a proton decays into, is a neutron decays into. It decays into a proton and an electron. So here's the neutrons, here's the electrons that go with the neutrons, and here's the 2 extra protons that make up a helium nucleus. So a helium nucleus is basically 2 neutrons and 2 protons, and that's what I've drawn here. So anyway, as stated, the force would be perpetual. So this would be the pendulum going back and forth. The forces will just go, and you can add as much force as you want. You can just keep piling force in, and it's just going to create pressure on these 2 electrons essentially, and they're going to push this proton forward, which in a sense will drag everything else forward because the electrons will move with it, and then these are protons but from the neutron. Okay, so these are protons contributed by neutrons, but anyway, they would move towards these 2 electrons, and this would be the weakest one. This proton would only have this force from these 2 electrons, so its attraction to these 2 electrons would be the only thing pulling this one, and it's a, you know, it's a pretty long stretch that this one would hold on. So this model is good, but it would be better if I could have put another electron right here. Then I could make these protons, all these red things are protons essentially, I could make them really attractive to each other, so to speak, going through the electron, because the electron would get rid of all the red force. So anyway, but I can't use that. You know, I can, but I don't like it. I obviously can't just put an electron in here and say that's a helium nucleus, because it's not what they say a helium nucleus is. So anyway, so I came up with this other way of looking at it. So instead of putting the 2 electrons up here, I put them down here. So we call this, you know, this is the neutron plus electron, I mean proton plus electron, and this is the other neutron, proton plus electron, and these electrons can't leave. They have to stay in between here, and this one has to stay in between here. They don't go through protons or any of that kind of stuff. So in the force, basically you can pump as much as you want to, and you pump it in here, and that force will keep pushing these electrons closer and closer to their proton, to their neutron center. And that force will essentially push the neutrons in a direction, and that direction can have a bias because the red force is going to be leaving another direction, so it can create a bias. And also this neutron's going to want to stay, this proton's going to be attracted to this electron. So it's just a matter of balancing the forces. Clearly all the protons hate each other, so the repulsive force is easy. It's accounting for this attraction force. That's the only thing that's a little complicated. So this would be the attraction force for this proton. This would be the attraction force for this one. So this one seems obvious. As these two electrons move further up, this proton will move to get closer to that electron. And obviously these are close already because they're neutron, and neutron protons are close. The proton and the electron are, the whole reason why we call it a neutron is because we didn't know it was a proton and an electron, because they're close together. So anyway, so this pendulum, essentially, this force going back and forth, so the force reflects off the electron, goes back into the proton, perpendicularly flies out, hits the other electron, reflects, and so this reflection is perpetual. So this is your perpetual E here. The E never dies. It can't die. It's trapped. So that's your force trap. And all the energy of that force trap has a vector in this direction. And the fact is that vector can be substantial and overcome any drag because you're flying into force. So the only thing that has to happen is you put extra force in and you'll overcome the drag because you are moving it with more force than the drag is creating as opposition. Yeah. So obviously there's the subtleties of measuring these distances, and figuring out how much these two electrons will bind the protons in terms of obliging them to move up. But you can sort of see that the energy sort of works out in the sense that the weakest one is the one going forward, but this pressure, as this one moves up, this one has to move up. So I mean, if this one goes forward, this one's going to have to go forward because this opposing pressure is going to push it. And then if this one moves up, then this one has to move this one forward. So it's all going to be push motion this way. So these three will be pushed forward, and this last one will be pulled because its electrons keep moving up because they keep hitting these protons and pushing them up. So anyway, so in theory, this looks good. Looks good. I like it. Yeah. So go ahead, take your shots and we'll see. But the nice thing is it has all the pieces of the helium nucleus, and the helium nucleus is the one thing we know for sure as a matter bit that can maintain velocity in free space. Okay, so that makes it look even gooder. Okay, so anyway, so that's it. Back to the comments. So this part isn't directly related to the subject probably, but it'll probably have something to do with the subject, perhaps. Alright, I have to get rid of go back to the comments. Okay, so there you go, Art Snarky. Alright, James, I think people who leave comments that don't address issues or facts that you mention in your videos should be ignored. Well, you can't, it's really nice to ignore everybody. I block plenty of people. I delete shitty comments. I mean, come on. I have to respond to something. And if there was more intelligent commentary available, then I'd respond to it. I mean, obviously most people don't have enough. They haven't done what I've done, which is spend the last 7 years of my life watching physics lectures. I mean, they don't know all of these fucking details. So how can they intelligently comment on a subject they don't know much about? I mean, I think I do make it simple and understandable, but yeah, apparently not enough for whatever the people watching these videos. I need more viewers, maybe, then there'll be more comments that were intelligent, and then I could ignore the idiots. Alright, by responding to them, you reward and encourage them. If you ignore them, they just spam the fuck out of the channel anyway. So, I mean, what's the reward? I mean, I block them, they create sock accounts, they downrate my videos. Still the rotten behavior persists, so what's the difference? And people that are interested in the issues and facts you bring up will see that and lose interest. Well, if that's their standard, I can't do much about the trivialities of the audience. I mean, if they can't tolerate the fact that I'm trying my best to address people's salient points, if they can't appreciate that, then what am I want? Go watch Ken Wheeler. He just deletes everything and blocks everybody. So go watch his videos. So I would suggest either turning off comments completely. Well, I think about it, but the point is I want the feedback. I want to be challenged. I want my theory to be well tested. That's my whole objective, is to have somebody do it well, not based on a bunch of fucking insults that are just useless, or just blocking them and moving on to substantive comments. Well, like I said, I've blocked plenty. Intelligent people will soon get bored watching you argue with idiots. Well, I can't do much for, if that's what your definition of intelligence is they can't figure out that I'm doing the best I can to try to be responsive and fair to the critics. I'm allowing them to take pretty substantial liberties with my integrity and dignity. So, I mean, if intelligent people can't figure out, I'm trying to figure out what the balance is. You know, free speech is a really tricky balance. I mean, if you've run a message board somewhere, you know, I did that for years, and it's really impossible, because there's some people who just want to spend all day talking about corn and poo. They just want to write complete crap. And you don't want to say you don't have any free speech rights, because every now and then they'll say something relevant. But, you know, the next comment's going to have all kinds of, you know, crap about crap. They actually type about their crap. I mean, fuck. So, I mean, free speech is difficult. Alright. So that's just Holiday's stupid patronizing crap. His crappy links to his crappy, somehow special relativity has come to save the day and explain magnetism and electricity, when it doesn't even come close. Alright, so Holiday, you dick, I'm not going to get invested in, comma, and so expect rational discourse with you. I don't even know what that means. I'm not going to get invested in. I guess he meant to say something else. And now he says, and so expect rational discourse with you. The problems is never you not stating things. So he's conceding that the problem isn't that I make arguments, fairly detailed ones, fairly comprehensive ones, fairly explicit ones. So that's not the problem. The problem is the criticisms are largely directed at the fact, okay, whatever that is. The criticisms are largely directed at the fact. I don't know what that is. What's the fact? That is all you do. Directed at the fact that's all I do. The problem is never you not stating things. So all I ever do is never not state things. I don't know what that could possibly mean. Anybody can do that. Make up just so story. So again, he's calling it a just so story. And I've pointed this out before. I could argue that Einstein's theory is just a so story, because there's so little way to prove any of it. But the fact is that it fits a lot of stuff. So it's one hell of a good story, because you can make it fit. Now, I've pointed out how this theory fits so fucking much. And I've detailed, I mean, do I have to make another video where I just detail all the fucking dots it connects in terms of unifying under one fucking force with 4 fucking rules the entire fucking universe? And you're telling me it's just a so story? I mean, it's just such bullshit rhetoric. It's not an argument of any kind. Anybody can do that, make up just so stories. That's religion. So again, he thinks it's a religion. That it's not something like evolution where the theory matches the evidence, that you can show the beaks evolving in the turtle shell and you can figure out why it changed because they had to reach up higher, and you can... No, it's not doing any of that. It's just some wacky nonsense in the multiverse, you know, or in dark matter space, or in the bent geometry. No, I'm not doing any of that crap. Your theory is the one full of loopholes and imaginary domains. There's no imaginary domains I'm suggesting here. So how the fuck is it like heaven and hell and make-believe thrones that gods are sitting on? How the fuck does it have any similarity with that at all, you fucking lying piece of shit? Alright, anyway. Modern physics? What a joke. By modern physics, he means the little fringe mathematicians and shit who, you know, have wacky, dopey, nutty theories like every particle has its own field, right? This is what most physicists believe. So he's arguing for fringe physics. Anyway, generally holds there to be 4 forces. I mean, look, the forces were invented hundreds of years ago. They were discovered, okay? And one of them is really quite obvious. The light one that you're missing from your 4. My 4 includes the light as one of the forces. Anyway. Gravity, strong and weak, nuclear, electric, and magnetic. And again, the whole point of the video was just to demonstrate that the magnetic and electric is a false dichotomy. It's crap. Electric is a byproduct of magnetic function. And I think I made that argument very well, and you haven't countered it with anything at all. Alright, anyway. There are lots of models yielding predictive rational equations. Predictive equations about what? So Einstein predicted that light is bent, yet the evidence doesn't exist. Einstein predicted that gravity is a well of some kind of well geometry that fucking planets roll down or something, or get pulled into. Not a shred of evidence for any of those causes. Not one piece of evidence demonstrating how that happens. Not a shred of evidence for any fucking time dimension. All the evidence just points to an association between velocity and clocks breaking. That's all the evidence demonstrates. I mean, this is such crap. Rational equations on this basis. So again, this obsession with equations when all I have seen is equations manipulated, you know, in the last 2 weeks. I mean, you know, I like the Jeff Yee guy, but it's all just a bunch of contrived equations. Look, it's the truth because I have a lot of deltas. There are other models doing likewise. Well, so again, I can debunk all those models, but that's really not what I'm doing here. I made the argument that by thinking of the proton and electron as the magnetic monopole, you can explain an awful lot of electrical and magnetic phenomena. That was the point of the video. The fact that you didn't get that is your problem. I mean, I've already pointed out the flaws in experiments. I mean, every one you touch. I mean, I touched the 2-slit experiment, found flaws. I touched the interferometer, I found flaws. You know. Anyway. Let's see. There are lots of models yielding predictive rational equations. So you say they're rational on this basis. There are other models doing likewise, whatever that means. And there's likewise and there's so forth. And there's also whatnot. wherein some of them are able to be unified. Well, again, nothing's unifying all the forces under 4 simple little rules. So go show me a model that has anywhere near the simplicity of mine. Anything even close to this simplicity. Not even a chance of a whisper of a hint that they're going to get anywhere near that. The problem is you do all stating it's not true. Now, I point out how I've said it so many times. The evidence is weak, and you won't concede the simple fact that that's the truth. That the evidence of lensing is weak. The evidence that there's some time dimension that gets bent is weak. And you won't concede that fact. Okay. It's the opposite way. What's the opposite? It's not true. It's a fact because you say so. And again, never with anything called any kind of defendable evidence. As stated, you assholes have got your cart so fucking ahead of your damn fucking evidence. You have jumped the evidence. And you're just walking around thinking you got somewhere. And you haven't gotten anywhere real. And you're just going to get run over by your own fucking horses. But never reconcile this with existing thinking. Why would I reconcile anything with existing fables about multiverses and photons that have radar? Why would I ever want to reconcile my theory or my logic to phantasmagorical, silly nonsense? You haven't even proven. Again, it's not about proving in any kind of, well, you know, where did Einstein prove the time dimension? Show me the proof. Where did Einstein prove that photons are bent by gravity? Has it been proven somewhere? You want to show me the proof, fuckhead? Because you don't have it. You haven't even proven, demonstrated on rational, logical, mathematical relation. Well, I think I have, in the sense that all of these theories fit the already existing mathematics. It already fits induction. I used the word at least 100 times on this channel. It's got to be more than that. It fits. So don't keep lying that I somehow need brand new mathematics because we don't have any mathematics. Yeah, we have lots of mathematics. I've said before, they've been very good at isolating some effects and having mathematics to fit effects. But their description of causes is bullshit. Okay, on rational, logical, mathematical relation behind agreeing on the inverse square law affecting your hypothesis. Well, and I also explained how it affects my hypothesis, and I also explained how the regular physics doesn't account for the fact that the inverse square law breaks down when objects get close together, and their mathematics doesn't even have compensations for those errors. They're perfect math. They don't even understand the inverse square law. They don't understand what causes it. Asshole. Fuck you. That was an edited comment. I mean, all those grammatical errors, and it was edited. This is where he says, clear as mud. You haven't explained why a powerful neodymium magnet doesn't pick up. Yes, I already did explain that. Yes. Twice now. Fuck you. You do know modern physics has equations, here we go again, that suggest electrons, protons have intrinsic charge forces. So again, intrinsic charge forces made out of what? Virtual mush? They don't have any explanation for any charge force and have an emergent magnetic force. We already know that. So again, this is just duh. I mean, what the fuck could a moving charge creating magnetism? That's already a statement. It's a statement I agree with, you shithead. So why are you saying that this is some sort of new discovery that I'm not paying attention to? By virtue of their spin. So a spin in what? Ether. Spin can't possibly be relevant. Realistically, it can't have much relevance outside of ether. Jeez. Okay. The first 2 times there was not enough spark between the 2 poles. So this is some Il's germ. During the experiment. At the end of this video, the 3rd time the spark showed because the man, Professor Lewin, an MIT professor, put his finger in the water. Well, if he did put his finger in the water, he would have got a 10,000 volt little shock. How can putting his finger in the water and grounding the charge possibly make the thing spark? Retard. He's cheating. This experiment is bullshit. So it's an experiment that's like 150 years old or something. It's been performed, I'm sure, for audiences in Britain and stuff. It's probably been performed at the Great Science Hall in Britain at one time or another. It's a pretty famous experiment, retard. And he has another lecture where he runs it for like 20 minutes, nutcase, and his fingers aren't anywhere near anything. All these conspiracy kooks. So Lanikia official. I don't know. You know, I just wonder. I mean, you know, sometimes your worst enemies are your friends, allies. All right, at 4150. Who cares? You said that his moving speed of light squared thing was spontaneous. Yes, I meant instantaneous, but what's the difference? But I think you might be using the wrong word. Well, thanks. If I can recall, spontaneity within thermodynamics is to do with entropy and likelihoods of learning it through chemistry is to describe a probability gradient for interaction with Gibbs free energy. I forgot this. It's delta entropy, delta G free energy. There's no free energy, but whatever. And delta H entropy, whatever, and relation to fuck. You meant to say instantaneous. Oh, good. You figured that out all on your own. That's so special. Because going the speed of light squared would be like superpositional speed. Yes, it wouldn't. It's hard to imagine, you know, what exactly, how fast something has to go to be going instantaneous speed, but whatever. Okay, I'm done. Sorry if that's annoying. Yeah, it is. Physics isn't exactly my field. I just do biology. Well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, any science should give you some perspective, and you've probably seen biology lectures where somebody says, you know, mitosis when they meant mitosis, and you didn't go, oh, you said the wrong word. So, not a very useful comment, so I'll delete it for that reason, just because it's not really on the subject in any way. Alright, so this is another Wikipedia classical and special relativity. Yeah, I already went to the article, I showed it, so enough of that crap. I've been following dissident science for a while. I like him because he says many interesting things. You know, I'm sorry, I'm getting less. It seems like he says the same thing over and over. So anyway, and I think he wants to shake people up. Well, I don't like the style in which he's doing it. But at the same time, he looks like an old grandma. Well, whatever. Haha. That's just such useless crap. I mean, I can't wait till you get old. You know, it's just such a little turd. Alright, welcome, ladies and germs, to the bewitching pool. What the fuck could that mean? So I guess he's talking about the water experiment or something. I don't know. Bewitching pool. I don't know. So this guy says, God, this is fascinating. You know, I don't know whether that's sarcasm. I always got to be mistrustful when somebody has some kind of cranky black man as an image. What's up with that? But anyway, just people are just such ragged pieces of shit. Another theory, you know, that I think I'm right on. I got the truth there. Alright, I don't think there's... Okay, with all due respect, Earth rotates in one direction. Particles strike the Earth. They strike the Earth faster in the direction of the rotation and slower in the direction of recession. The atmosphere is a buffer against the Earth's rotation. So the atmosphere moves a lot slower than the surface of the Earth. So it's kind of pointless, in my opinion, to talk about the subtle difference between the Earth spinning and how much stuff is hitting in opposition to the spin versus stuff hitting with the spin. I mean, I don't understand exactly how you can have this idea, like say the sun's radiation, as the Earth is spinning, it's pushing one side of the atmosphere when it's pushing against it on the other side. So there's always sort of a symmetry. That's the whole idea of spin. It creates a symmetry. Like whatever you do going one way, you're going to undo it going the other way. Anyway, rotates in one direction. So maybe he's not talking about the Earth rotating. He's talking about the Earth rotating around the sun. Faster in one direction of rotation and slower in the direction of recession. There's no recession, so I don't even know I don't know what you're talking about. Why does the Earth not slow rotation more than observed because of this phenomenon? Response appreciated. Thank you. So if it's going through the field, it's spinning one way. So it's an ether argument again. There's no ether. That would be my simplest answer. So if it's spinning this way and it's going into something, then this side is going against the coming thing, and this side's getting pushed faster by this stuff. But it's a rotation, so the faster speed is just going to end up added to the rotation speed. So it just doesn't matter. What you're losing in rotation on one side, you're gaining in rotation on the other side. Well, Superior Mind played with it, but oh, look at all that shit he wrote for a simple question. Anyway, I don't know much. I don't know how much one would expect it to slow down, but rotation used to be 6 hours about 4 billion years ago. Well, 4 billion's a lot. You know, the Earth is incredibly massive and in scale relative to space dust or other interactions. Yeah, certainly. But if there was another planet it crashed into or something. Anyway, aside from conserved angular momentum during original formation, one could even note the hypothetically there would be instances of incredibly tiny, relatively speaking, elevated mass bias or increase on one side, and note that this should result in more gravitational influence between the Earth and the Sun. Well, the trick is the Sun is being pulled by everything else in the solar system. So the Sun's rotating, and the Sun's rotation, is, leaking, onto the other planets. And note that this should result in more gravitational influences between the Earth and the Sun. Again, very tiny. On that side at a given instant. And note the Earth rotates counterclockwise relative to the northern hemisphere, and as well this is true for most planets. I'd imagine certain types of collisions of huge pieces, depending on how they collide, would result in a few clockwise rotations we see. I'd imagine smaller debris like asteroids don't have enough mass for this accumulative effect to be consistent. Well, it certainly matters on what angle they hit also, how the energy is, I mean, technically they can hit head on and just push the Earth towards the Sun or something. They can, they can hit in ways where they won't add to rotation, and they can hit in ways where it'll add completely to rotation. But anyway, it's not a terribly, look, whatever. I mean, it's just, you say with all due respect, I'm going to have a conversation about something that's pretty distant, in my opinion, from the physics I'm trying to get to. But whatever. I think that's it. Is quantum entanglement real? No. It's silly. Anyway, I know you're an artist. I'd imagine, no, I've already done this imagining crap. Yeah, imagining's easy. Yeah, so I think I've covered enough crap. Yeah, so these were just I wrote a comment to the art guy, and that wasn't enough for him. Let's see what he said here. And I'd be really interested in how you avoid contradicting yourself to your first reply. I don't even know what that means. how you avoid contradicting yourself to your first reply. I mean, I can read my reply. Hint, asshole. What matters is the net total. Most of the proton mass momentum would be left to right, and most of the electron momentum would be down. Overcoming drag only requires more mass to be going downstream and more force to be going upstream. Though again, you really didn't get the point of my argument, is that the force going upstream obviously has to be moving the whole frame, the box. You know. So before I had the theory was sort of dependent on procession. So the argument attempting to be made is that this box processes, and it processes by forcing matter bits to react to the energy that's perpetually moving through this cycle. But as I thought, I forgot that the energy in this perpetual motion thing ends up reflecting off the electrons and would end up going in the opposite direction, which would be destructive to the procession. But the idea would be that the box would move, these pieces would move incrementally as the pressure changed, and they would keep processing in the direction. So I've now gotten rid of the procession and turned it into a pendulum idea, and so it's always banging up. Okay, so I think that's enough. So again, sorry, too many videos. I imagine people don't have 5 hours to spend listening to me, and I appreciate the ones who are. Thank you. I really don't mind somebody making comments like, well, what do you think of this? Or how does your theory account for this? And point to an experiment or some kind of, something that can be realistically analyzed. Unlike Hasselday, who points to mathematics, it might take you a year to analyze. I mean, to find out all the tricks in it. The 17 different little tricks. As I've pointed out in these theories, they just create 1 over pi epsilon delta things that just end up being safety valves for their equations. They're kind of constant, that keep their equations from going all wacky. I mean, there's so much crap in the math. Alright, but enough. I'm not opposed to mathematics. I don't think math is useless. I don't think it doesn't have any function. The simple point is, I had every expectation to cater, to build my theory consistent with the existing math. I don't have any horrible opinion of the math. I have a horrible opinion of the assumptions that go into what they think the causes are for the relationships formalized in the math. Now, I clearly think some of the mathematics is contrived. It's constructed, like the 2-slit math. But I'm not saying every bit of the formula is crap. I'm saying, no, the little part where they did this, where they make this sine theta thing, that's the part that's broken. Fuck. Alright, anyway. Enough. More than enough. Anyway. Till the next time. And such.